Hello and welcome to Pockenrop. This video is part of my ReImagined series, the previous one of which was Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I took Elton John's double album from 1973 and attempted to condense it down into a cracking single album. This video takes a slightly different approach, and I am imagining what might have been had we had an 8th Wings album following Back to the Egg. My view, that final Wings lineup of Paul and Linda, Denny Laine, Lawrence Juba and Steve Holley had got quite a lot still left to give, but events took over, including Paul's drugs bust in 1980 in Japan, and of course the murder of John Lennon at the end of 1980, and potentially Paul was getting a little tired of the band Wings. What we do know is that in 1980 and 81, Wings were rehearsing and they were recording or intending to record further material, some of which ended up on the albums that you see here. So we have Tug of War, Pipes of Peace and Give My Regards to Broad Street. I'm going to attempt to create an 8th Wings album. This will be based on material that is known to have been practiced or rehearsed by Wings in 1980, or has been released on one of these albums and features Denny Laine, who was the stalwart 3rd Wings member after Paul and Linda McCartney. So let's dive in on what I've built for side A. So side A kicks off with the title track of Tug of War. This features Denny Laine on guitar. The next track also features Denny, and it is Average Person from Pipes of Peace. I've then followed that track with what I think is the absolute gem of Tug of War and always have done. It is Somebody Who Cares. Now, I have heard a story that this is the point at which the relationship between the McCartneys and Denny Laine actually broke down, that Denny didn't think this was a particularly good song when they were recording it. However, his guitar work remains on the track that we have on Tug of War, so it's a legitimate inclusion in this Fantasy Wings album. The next track was known to have been practiced by Wings in 1980. It has leaked out on bootlegs, but it remained unreleased and completely and utterly reworked for the Give My Regards to Broad Street sessions, and it is No Values. So this was it's a cracking little rock song. It's one of the highlights of a pretty weak album, and it has a Wings feel to it. You can understand that this was knocking around from 1980 onwards, possibly even sooner, and good rock song, a good Wings rocker it would have been. The 5th track I have on side A is I'll Give You a Ring. So this was the B-side to Take It Away. And this had been floating around as far back as 1974. There's even a little bit of it in the one-hand clapping that you can now get on the McCartney archive of Band on the Run. So this song had been pootling around for some time, so we know that Wings have had a go at doing this. And again, because this features Denny Laine guitar work, the album for me, side 1, is rounded off by Ballroom Dancing. Now this opens side 2 of Tug of War, but I feel that the way that the song ends, where there's the crescendo of horns and then there's that horn that goes da, 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 and it stops dead, would be a really punchy, excellent way to end side 1 of my Fantasy Wings album. So side A, we have got, therefore, Tug of War, Average Person. Take it down a bit with Somebody Who Cares. Straight back in with a rock track, No Values. Pastiche, music hall-y style thing with I'll Give You a Ring. Concluding with Ballroom Dancing. So let's flip the record and see what would be kicking off side 2. So for side 2, I have got Rain Clouds. Now this is a co-write between Paul and Denny. It was the B-side to Ebony and Ivory. And so my view is if Wings had carried on, this would definitely have been on the eighth Wings album. And I think it's a good opener for side 2. Following on from that, we return to the Pipes of Peace album, and I'm lifting Keep Under Cover. Again, known to have been done in those early Wings rehearsals that would have potentially led to this album. Following on from Keep Under Cover as the third track on side 2, I have got the piecework that is The Pound Is Sinking. Throughout his career, McCartney has stitched together little bits of ideas and separate songs, dating all the way back to things like, A Day in the Life from Sgt. Pepper, through the medley, things like Band on the Run. And The Pound Is Sinking, I think his processes would have stayed the same, so that we'd end up with the same 3-part song that we've got The Pound Is Sinking. So we've got the original part, Pound Is Sinking, there is the Hear Me Lover section, and then there's that middle part of I Fear My Dear, that is evidently clear. That part, I think it would have still ended up in those 3 parts as we know it now. So my third track, Pound Is Sinking. Fourth track, returning again to Pipes of Peace for what I think was Denny's final contribution on a Wings album. It's The Sweetest Little Show. Again, demos have leaked out of Wings rehearsing this way back in the 80s. One of the things that often was present on Wings album was the songwriting contributions of Denny Laine. So we already have the idea of Rain Cloud, the co-write. But had Red Rose Speedway been released as the double that it was designed, we would have had I Would Only Smile, a completely Denny Laine song. We have Time to Hide from Speed of Sound. We have also got Again and Again and Again, which is my personal highlight from Back to the Egg. So I think there would have been a Denny Laine song. And in those leaked rehearsals in the bootlegs, there is a track that was called Denny's Song. And that ultimately became the song Be Together on his Learning to Fly album from 1982. And I think we'd have had that on my Fantasy Wings album. The penultimate track of Tug of War is Dress Me Up as a Robber. Again, features Denny's guitar work. I've placed it as the penultimate track again on my Fantasy album. And the concluding track, there had to be space for Wanderlust. Now, this dates back, as far as I'm aware, to London Town. The boat that the McCartney stayed on was called the Wanderlust. Given that we know Denny has played on this song, I think it's the perfect closer for my Fantasy Wings 8th album. So side B looks like this. Rain Clouds, Keep Under Cover, The Pound Is Sinking, Sweetest Little Show, Be Together, Dress Me Up as a Robber, and concluding with Wanderlust. So I think that Wings on High, as I've called it, sounds like a great album. If you'd like to hear what it might have sounded like, then in the description below is a link to a Spotify playlist. Unfortunately, Be Together is not on Spotify, otherwise I would have slotted it in. But just before I leave this subject, some of the songs that would have been under consideration. Ebony and Ivory. It was definitely rehearsed by Wings in 1980. Seems Like Old Times, a song that George Martin rejected, but actually got a good vibe to it. I'd like Paul to revisit this at some point and put it out there. It's not on the Tug of War archive. Maybe we'll get it on Back to the Egg archive. Water Spout, the outtake from London Town, which would have definitely improved it. Cage, outtake from Back to the Egg. I think they may well have gone back and reworked some of that. It was certainly being worked on for Cold Cuts, the aborted outtakes album he was developing. Maisie, an instrumental by Lawrence Juba. He did eventually release that on an album in 1982. You can find that on YouTube. Robber's Ball, probably not. This was a bit of a joke track, which clearly was going to be Cold Cuts. Same Time Next Year is a beautiful song. It is available on the B-side of Put It There. That was in 1978. They may have gone back and had another look at the same time next year. Stop, you don't know where she came from. That is available on the archive edition of Tug of War. It's a total throwaway, but who knows? Further work might have led to a proper song. Ode to a Koala Bear. Now, this was the last thing that McCartney was working on in the studio before Lennon's murder. And lastly, known to have been kicking around for quite a while, and I believe was recorded in 1980 before being released 4 years later, We All Stand Together. Now, that I haven't included that here because that clearly stood apart as it was for the Rupert project. So that's my Fantasy 8th Wings album, Wings on High. What do you think of it? Have a listen. Let me know in the comments below. Could we have had an 8th Wings album? Or is it better that actually Wings dissolved and we have the wonderful Tug of War? Let me know. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. I'll be back next week with another video. But until then, thanks for watching.